Hey, what's happening, guys, and welcome to this week's 10-minute video. I hope that the last few weeks we've been working on wines has really helped you understand a little bit better, even though I know that I did mess up on one of our wines last week. But anyways, this week we're going to get into a super serious topic, and that is ABC, the Alcohol Beverage Control and proof of IDs. So we're going to watch a short video as to really the things you need to be looking for. But before I get into that, I just want to let you know that in Midtown, starting this week, is Beer Week. It's going to go all the way through the following week. So just be aware that is happening. And the other thing that's happening starting this Monday is a promotion we're going to start doing through our social media outlets. And it's going to be a mole tasting. So we've been doing some posts on our mole. So you may be getting people coming to the tables asking for a free appetizer that they saw through social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or what have you. If you do hear that, please tell your manager, and they'll bring them out one of our VIP tastings, which is going to be a plantain chips that they can dip in our mole sauce with a little bit of sesame seed and queso fresco. So let's go ahead and dive right into these IDs here. And really what we're looking for are minors. You know, we're looking for people that are not of drinking age in California. So before we get into the video, let's just look at a few quick things. One of the main things is we all know California IDs very well and what they look like. You can accept out-of-state IDs, but if you have never seen one, which and a lot of times you probably haven't, go to your manager. Let your manager know. Let them do the research and make sure that the card that is presented from another state is valid. Other things that you can, and this used to be a huge problem back in the day, but passports are also okay to take. But again, if you do not feel comfortable, do not take it yourself. Take it to a manager and let them do the research. Know this, that not only is there an incredible fine to the restaurant for selling to a minor, and that being in a suspension, so loss of alcohol sales would just be horrible for us, but there is also a fine to you, which is huge. And which can happen, if someone's driving, gets in an accident, if something happens to the person who's underage that you sold to, and they get in some accident and, a worst case scenario, kill themselves or somebody, you are facing jail time. So this is an absolutely huge topic, and something that you have to be taken care of when we're talking about selling alcohol to anybody. So let's go ahead and get into the video. Mind you, the guy's out of Oregon, but it was the best thing I could find for us. And basically everything that he's talking about is about how to read an ID and feel the most comfortable with checking IDs. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get to the video, and we'll see you guys next week. I'm getting tired of doing these things, by the way, so I am trying my hardest to find someone to tape this so you do not have to see my beautiful face the following week. We'll see you later.
So today we're going to talk about the quick check features on these IDs that will make you a very proficient ID checker. First of all, when you're checking ID, you need to get the ID in your hands. Okay, you don't look at it in someone's wallet. Don't let them flash a billfold at you. Make sure they remove the ID from the wallet so you can get it in your hands. Make sure you observe the ID in proper lighting. We generally say bright enough for you to read a newspaper in. There's some very minor details of these IDs that are going to be lost if you're checking them in a dark doorway. When you get the ID in your hand, always compare the ID to the person who's handing it to you. Make sure the photo matches the person you're looking at. Make sure that the facial structures that are non-alterable, bone structure, eyebrows, ears, are all consistent with the person who's handed you the ID. So once you've compared the picture to the person standing in front of you, make sure that the ID you have in your hand is valid. Of course, things you want to check are expiration date, the state in which it was issued. All right. If it's an Oregon ID, you're obviously going to be more familiar with Oregon ID than you are out-of-state IDs, but make sure that the ID is not expired. Make sure it's not hole punched. Oregon issues IDs from a central location these days, which means they hole punch the original ID when they issue the temporary, and the ID is then returned to them for backup ID, but it's not a valid ID in and of itself. Get the ID in your hand and get it in a side light. Get some glare off the surface of the ID and make sure it's a nice smooth finish. Check for holograms or OVDs, optically variable devices, which are holograms that change color in different light. Also check the finish of the ID and make sure it's a nice smooth finish. If it's got a mottled finish or it appears to be like a hammered finish, you're going to want to probably look a little deeper. That's your first clue to dig and make sure that this ID is valid. I say bend it like Beckham to a lot of folks, and they say, what the heck is that? Grab the ID and get it in your hands and bend it strongly towards the front, towards the picture of the ID, and see if the finish crinkles or wrinkles. It shouldn't make any noise, and it should remain a nice smooth finish. This ID is fake and has got a wrinkled lamination on it now. All right, they use a heat-treated glue for manufacturing valid IDs that they're not using in the manufacture of counterfeit IDs, and it causes the lamination to become unattached when you bend the ID. The other things to look for are a line of dirt or debris around the outside of the lamination. Again, the weak glue tends to bleed and it collects dirt from people's wallets and pockets. But if you look around the outside of these IDs, you'll notice that there's pocket lint and dirt around the lamination. So that's another good clue. Okay, you've got two solid clues. It's probably a fake ID at that point in time. So if you see lamination peeling, if you see scratches and cracks in the ID, if you bend it and it breaks, it's probably a cheaper plastic. Most people check ID in a very rapid fashion. They feel rushed at the door. You've got a line of people waiting to get in your location. Most ID people check IDs for about a second and a half. Grab the ID, look at the person, check the birth date, and hand it back. All right, that's not a really good ID check. With the features found on the new counterfeit IDs, you need to take more time. We'd like you to take 10. Take 10 seconds with each ID. All right, get the ID in your hands. Look at it. Compare the picture to the person standing in front of you. Check for the security features we talked about. Check the finish of the ID. Bend the ID. See if it's got any of the telltale marks of a counterfeit ID. Ask your questions. Is this your ID? Is this ID issued by Rhode Island, for instance? When you're checking ID for age verification to purchase alcohol in the state of Oregon, please remember that there are only 4 types of IDs that you can accept. An Oregon-issued ID or driver's license, another state-issued driver's license or ID, a passport, or a military or CAC card. Those are the only 4 types of IDs that you're allowed to accept. Now, you don't have to accept them if you're not familiar with them, if you don't feel that the ID is valid, or you just don't believe that the person presenting the ID is the person who's on the ID.